Today we are at the top of Chelmsford High Street, and behind us is the great magnificent Shire Hall. But how did this building come into existence? Well, we have to go back to 1769 and a local squire called Bamber Gascoigne. He convinced his friends that what was needed in Chelmsford was a new courthouse and also a building that would house a ballroom so they could hold magnificent functions. The idea also extended to having a prison here as well, and the prison would have stood on the corner of Waterloo Lane just over there. Now, the townspeople, when they were consulted on this, weren't so impressed with all these plans, and aided by a local doctor called Dr. Benjamin Pugh, they managed to convince Bamber Gascoigne that the whole thing was not a good idea. And so it was shelved for 18 years, and then the whole thing came to light again. This time it was by the judges, the powerful judges who were residing court in a building just over here called the Great Cross, and that was the courthouse and administration building for the market as well. In 1788 they purchased this piece of land, which contained then 6 houses and 2 inns, and had the entire group knocked down and then sold all the raw materials off at auction. They then appointed John Johnson, the then county architect, to then design the building, and he came up with the idea of a building in Portland stone as a Greek or Roman temple style with codestone decorations. Now, codestone was a special hard-wearing ceramic that was developed in 1769 by George Code of Lambeth. And the codestone is the cream decorations that you see, the balustrades and the friezes on top of the building. So for the construction of the building, John Johnson used the same team that had in 1787 been used to construct the stone bridge. This included a construction company by the name of Andrews, Horsfield and Johnson. Johnson just happened to be John Johnson's son, but nobody really seemed to object to this, so it went on okay. The stonemason was George Ray, as he was with the stone bridge. Now, George Ray then arranged for the Portland stone to be taken from the south coast by boat up to Malden and then overland to Chelmsford, where it was stored in his yard just in Springfield Road. There it was prepared and cut, ready to be taken to the construction site. Now, while the construction was taking place, the judges in the great courthouse here decided that they really did not want court sessions interrupted or the operations of the market. So the Great Cross stayed in place, even with the building being built behind it. This meant that construction was limited to the front of the building to just 10 feet. So as a result, every time the court was in session, the judges had all the builders' rubbish moved away, and this also included a makeshift tool shed which had to be moved very, very frequently, and this whole practice continued for some 20 months. It must have been very difficult to construct a building with all these requirements. In front of the building once stood a large cannon, the Sebastopol cannon, a trophy from the Crimea War. It would still be there today had not a group of apprentices in the 1900s actually decided to fire it as a prank. The council then moved the cannon to its present location in Oaklands Park.
The clock was presented by Sparrows Bank as part of their celebrations and installed almost 100 years later in 1887. The unveiling ceremony was a big local event and coincided with Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee. At exactly 12 noon on the 21st of July 1887, the temporary curtains were drawn back and a children's choir from the local school sang the national anthem, accompanied by the band of the 2nd Middlesex Regiment. The 3 friezes on the upper story of Shire Hall show 3 panels of mercy, wisdom and justice. These were designed by John Bacon. Looking closely at the wisdom frieze in the middle, we can see that the shield on the lower edge has the wording Code London 1790. This confirms the year this sculpture was made by George Code in Lambeth, London. On the right we have Justice, and we can see both the scales and the sword are made of metal. Next to her is a cherub bearing a scroll inscribed with the words "The Law." On the left we have Mercy, with her hand outstretched, and in the other hand she is holding an inverted cross. Before we go inside, it is worth mentioning that there have been 2 side extensions added to the building in its life. The larger on the left was built in 1890, whereas the one on the right was added in 1930. Vestibule or foyer. When the building was first opened, this area was used by the local farmers to trade corn. Although it was a nice open space, the light levels were deemed to be poor for this activity. In fact, some of the traders moved outside so their products could be seen in a better light. The complaints for poor lighting went on for a number of years and were partly addressed by removing some interior walls. Eventually, in 1857, a new venue was provided for trading corn. This building appeared on the other side of Tyndall Square and was known as the Corn Exchange. In 1936, the hall was given a major Art Deco refurbishment, and as part of this, a number of the pillars were removed. This picture, taken in February 1936, shows the vestibules before this work took place. On each side of the staircase, we see the entrances to the main courtrooms. These pictures, taken both before and after 1936, show the changes. We see in one courtroom that the dock has been enclosed and padded seating has been added to the benches facing the judge. The clock has been replaced and the viewing gallery has a boarded front. Lighting has also been changed to give greater illumination in the room. Here are the courts when we last visited the building in 2018. Before we go upstairs, I would just like to bring your attention to this stone statue of a lady, a water nymph, known as the Naiad. The statue was made by John Baker. She was made of Code stone and designed by John Johnson. The purpose of the Naiad was to provide a centrepiece to a freshwater fountain which once stood in the middle of Tyndall Square. It was designed to be a decorative embellishment over the town's public water supply, and the water spouted from dolphins' mouths at the Naiad's feet. This watercourse was first laid by the Black Friars back in the 13th century and took water from a spring which was situated in Coval Wells. The water was transported in a pipeline made from hollowed out elm trees. Main staircase. On the 22nd of February 1856, the Shire Hall was the scene of a tragedy. A large crowd thronged into the Shire Hall to view the controversial trial of 5 men charged with murder committed while poaching. Because of the public interest, the court was being held upstairs in the assembly room. People pushed and shoved to try and get into the court. Such was the rush on the third flight of stairs that the stair balustrades gave way, and then the stone stairs themselves broke away from the wall. People and masonry tumbled down onto the flight of steps below. There were casualties. When the area was finally cleared, a body of an 18-year-old youth was found. 4 others were also seriously injured, and many others suffered minor injuries. As the stairs were then destroyed, the court, witnesses and prisoners had to make their way out of the building via a window onto the roof of a nearby property and then down a ladder. The whole story is part of an article published in the Essex Standard on the 27th of February 1856. The County Room, or the Ballroom. Once there was an annual feast of florists that took place at Saracen's Head, but as soon as Shire Hall was opened in 1791, this then moved to the new venue, as well as many balls that took place soon after that date. In 1814, to celebrate the supposed defeat of Napoleon by Wellington, a ball was held in the Shire Hall, which was attended by a wide variety of local people. It started early evening, and at 1 a.m. around 300 people sat down to a fine supper. After supper, they danced until dawn to music played by the band of the Surrey Regiment. The celebrations were a bit premature, as Napoleon, as we now know, was finally defeated at Waterloo in June 1815. There was a celebration with a private dinner for local gentry in the county room for the coronation of King George IV in July 1821. A public banquet was laid out down the High Street for all to take part. This was followed by a firework display and an illumination of the town by candle and gaslight. A large picture has been painted of this event and can be seen in the Essex Record Office. In 1837, there was the opening of St John's Church in Molsham Street, and 350 fine ladies and gentlemen attended this event and sat down in the county room to a cold luncheon prepared by Mr Bacon of the Great Black Boy Inn and Mr Lake of the Saracen's Head Hotel. The scene was described at the time as highly exhilarating and delightful. They were later joined by the Bishop and Lady Mildmay. Strangely, it seems that not many of the ordinary residents of Molsham Street were present at this celebration. In 1891, the sash windows on the first floor were reglazed with plate glass, and in the following year further office accommodation was obtained by lowering the ceiling of the county room. In November 1900, an exhibition of Essex manufacturers took place in Shire Hall, and the Marconi Company took part. Mr Marconi, being the showman, hired the ballroom and installed working, receiving and transmitting radio equipment in the room. During the exhibition, assistants in white coats were seen sending and receiving wireless messages across the room. The visitors could witness at first hand this intensely interesting new invention in action. Returning to the courtrooms, the first courts were held in the Shire Hall on the 12th of July 1791. Over time, meetings were held in the courts to debate various issues such as church rates, the impact of the Poor Law on the town, and as a consequence the transfer of ownership of land to build some of the new schools. In January 1849, following a number of local outbreaks of cholera, the local Board of Health convened a meeting of local inhabitants in the Grand Jury Room. The inspector was one Edward Creasley, and they discussed the town's sewerage, drainage and water supply conditions. This meeting was the start of a massive sewer building programme which, under James Fenton, made a significant difference to the cleanliness of the town. The local Board of Health was the forerunner to what later became the Borough Council and then the City Council. The first elections of this board took place in 1850, when new members were elected by the townspeople for the first time. The count took place in Shire Hall. In 1874, the hall was the place where the new market was instigated. At the meeting of the Board of Health, it was debated either to lease or to buy the site of the market, then behind the Corn Exchange, and the decision was for full ownership. The new road from Tyndall Square was then called Market Road. On the lower floor of Shire Hall are the cells, intended only as temporary accommodation when the courts were in session, but these were well-built cells, which had a secure door with a viewing porthole. Much later the cells were used as an overflow when the police station became full. On one of the walls is an interesting piece of unofficial artwork. It would appear that at some time a talented artist spent time on the lower floor under Shire Hall. And so we come to the strangest feature of Shire Hall, the tunnel, used as a secure transfer for the accused from the cells in the police station on the corner of Waterloo Lane to the cells in Shire Hall.
Well, that is a brief history about our hall today, and I hope that you've managed to gain some information about it that maybe you didn't know before. We are looking in the long term to be able to actually get inside the building, but maybe that's for another day. In the meantime, thank you for watching.